All right, wonderful. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Abia Khan. I'm a sophomore at Harvard College. I'm involved at the Institute of Politics through the Fellows and Study Groups program. I was Congressman Thornberry's chief of staff this past semester and was Mayor Michael Tubbs's outreach liaison the previous semester. In addition to this, I'm also a cadet in the Army ROTC battalion over at MIT. Today's event is co-sponsored by the Center for Public Leadership, the Institute of Politics, and the Veterans Impact Initiative. Today's event is fittingly titled after our special guest, Amy McGrath's memoir, Honor Bound, a conversation with retired Lieutenant Colonel Amy McGrath about service, sacrifice, and leadership. With that, I'm incredibly honored and pleased to introduce our guests today, Amy McGrath and David Gergen. Amy McGrath graduated from the United States Naval Academy and was commissioned as a Marine Corps officer in 1997 and served 20 years in the Marines. In 2002, Amy became the first woman in the Marine Corps to fly a combat mission in FA-18. She later served in the Pentagon as a Marine Corps liaison to the State Department and other federal agencies. She's also served as a senior instructor at the United States Naval Academy, teaching US government and national security courses before retiring at the rank of Lieutenant Colonel and moving back home to Kentucky to raise her family. There, she ran races for the US House and Senate. More recently, she started Honor Bound Incorporated, which is a nonpartisan organization committed to leadership development for women with a service background and encouraging these women to run for elected office. She has a book titled Honor Bound, An American Story of Dreams and Service, published in August of 2021. Amy is currently teaching national security policy at the University of Kentucky Patterson School of Diplomacy and International Commerce. Moderating today's discussion is David Gergen. David is a professor of public service at the Harvard Kennedy School, where he co-founded the Center for Public Leadership. He has served as White House advisor to 4 presidents and is currently a senior political analyst at CNN. Thank you both for taking the time out of your extremely busy schedules to share your knowledge and insights with us all today. And with that, I will turn it over to y'all.
Okay, good. I'm David Gergen, and I'm delighted to be here with Amy. She's one of the bravest people I know. Think of the fact that she went and learned how to fly this jet and then took on Mitch McConnell in the same lifetime. That's really rarely done, Amy. Congratulations, and congratulations on your new book. This Honor Bound is Amy's been working on this for a while. It's a memoir, but it also is a good reflective look at what goes on in politics in our country, as well as what goes on in the military side. So she's a woman of many talents. We're delighted to have you here. Do we have, I think, Kevin, perhaps 1 or 2 photographs that we can look at that will show us what Amy's been flying and doing?
Yeah, for sure. Here you go.
Okay, Amy, tell us about these photographs.
Well, this is from my right after the campaign, but or in between my 2 campaigns. In the background is just a jet outside the Aviation Museum in Kentucky. But it's this is me when I was training to be a front seater in the F-18. That's initial
Very
flight
different
school.
harbor then.
Yeah, this is a T2, and this is my second tour in the F-18 community at Miramar. And
Is that an F-18 behind you?
It is. Those are all the women in my squadron. About 120 Marines in my squadron. Those were the women. So not too many of us.
How many people? Front seat and a back seat in the plane?
The backseater is the weapons and navigation, basically the weapons systems officer, and the front seater is the pilot in the F-18.
You started off in the back seat.
I did. I had bad eyes. I had pretty bad vision, and Uncle Sam, after my first tour, fixed my eyes. And then I applied and became a front seater. So got a chance to do it.
You're reminding me a little bit of Harry Truman, when he was applying for the First World War and his eyes were bad, and he memorized the eye chart.
Yeah. Yeah, you overcome it. That previous picture was my husband in Afghanistan in our 3rd tour, my 3rd tour there. My husband was also a pilot. He was in the Navy. So, yeah,
good.
Yeah.
How fast do those planes fly?
Well, they're over the speed of sound. If you take off a lot of the external tanks and things, you can get screaming down at Mach 1.2, which is pretty darn fast. So
that is pretty darn fast. That's very, very fast. So you had like 89 combat missions, I'm told.
I did. I got a chance to fly both in the Afghanistan theater and the Iraq theater in 2003. And then I did a second tour in Afghanistan in 2010. So
right. you must have been, you must have had very, very mixed feelings about the wind up to Afghanistan.
Yes, in fact, and I know we don't talk about it too much anymore, but I have even stronger feelings about Iraq, because I believe that was a fight that we went into under false pretenses. And I feel like our country still didn't really do a deep dive as to how we invaded another country, under the guise of them having weapons of mass destruction, which they didn't have. But the Afghanistan fight is it's very complex. It's there was never an easy answer in Afghanistan, and it ended, at least for us, the same way it's been going for the last 20 years, which is not so well.
Yeah. I had the good fortune of being attending Colin Powell's memorial service this past few days. And it was so striking. I got to know Colin, how, I don't know, it left such a jagged feeling in him, what went on in Iraq and how we got in there, and the testimony he was told by the agency and intelligence side, what things he should say. He said them, and it turned out they were wrong.
I know.
But he went to his grave with great regrets about that. I think it was the worst moment of his life.
But I believe that he was such a man of honor,
yes,
who to be able to turn around and say that publicly and to acknowledge it. That's why I had so much respect for General Powell.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this question of honor is very serious with you. You said Honor Bound is the name of your book. Tell us how this sort of got imbued in you, coming out of Kentucky, going to the Naval Academy. Where in your development, things like that, where in one's development, leader's development, things like that happen?
Well, for me, it happened at the Naval Academy. I fought to become a midshipman there. When I was there, you're sort. Well, meaning at that time, for what I wanted to do, I wanted to fly fighter jets. And when I was growing up, those were closed to me. So there was a law called the Combat Exclusion Law.
Yeah.
And it wasn't repealed until 1993, late 93 is when they repealed the law. And that was right after the 1992 elections. And we had more women elected to Congress, and we had a new president, as you know. And they changed that law. And for me, I was a senior in high school. So I sort of entered the U.S. Naval Academy right when the doors were open. And that was really significant, because I became one of the first wave of women to be able to go into these combat positions that had been previously closed to women before me. But the honor piece was something that I learned, about what that really means in terms of service to your country at the Naval Academy. And this idea of doing the right thing, the idea that, you're going to make mistakes along the way, but a part of being a leader of character is having that honor, having that ability to do the hard things, having the ability to fess up, to be honest about things. And, and nobody, I think, exudes that more than General Powell in his lifetime. But that's where it was instilled in me in Annapolis.
Mm-hmm. And you served, how long did you serve for that first time out?
Well, I graduated from Annapolis in 1997, and I served 20 years in the Marine Corps, and I loved it. And I left really because I believed at that time in 2017 that where I was needed was to run for political office. I thought we needed better leaders in this country, and I felt like I could make a difference. And that's why I retired and ran and went into politics.
Right. And so where are you now? Where's your head? People often ask me, where's Amy McGrath headed these days?
Well, I'm spending a lot more after both of my races. I went sort of back to back, ran for the House and then the Senate. Right. And, I look back on it, and we did make a difference in both of those races. It obviously wasn't the result, for me personally being elected, but I think it was about our country, and that was really important. So I'm really proud of that. And I haven't stepped out of the political realm. I'm still behind the scenes. I have 501c4 organization entitled Honor Bound, same title as my book, which is really out there to inspire and support women who have served the country to get into political office nationwide. And it's not just women veterans, but women who have served maybe in the FBI or CIA, that sort of thing. Because I believe that folks who have, have a track record of public service are the types of leaders, David, that we need in government today. And so that's where my focus is. I also have a super PAC as well. And we're trying to make a difference politically in this country, even though I'm not in office.
Good for you. And the name of the organization then is Honor Bound?
Yeah, Honor Bound is the 501c4. And if anybody's interested in that, it's honorboundamericans.com.
Yeah.
So,
and where do they go?
They go to honorboundamericans.com.
Okay.
And that is a place where we would help them think about and get connected politically to try to get into office. That's sort of what I want to do, is help others now. And then my super PAC is Democratic Majority Action. And that is a super PAC that is really designed to go after those members of Congress who voted against our country on January 6th. And that's just something that I feel is really important.
Good for you. I joined up, I think you probably know Ry Barkott, but he started an organization called With Honor.
Yep.
And it's essentially for veterans who are coming out to run for office, especially the House of Representatives. We just had a gathering over the weekend of people who, if you get With Honor's help getting elected, then if you go to the Congress, there's another organization called the caucus called For Country.
Right.
Many people who are coming through with Honor go on to the caucus, and there are now 25 veterans who are members of that For Country caucus. And the theory is, if you can get enough of these people elected, you can change the center of American politics, because so many of the people who come in as veterans, are not very partisan. They are, people who fought under the same flag tend to be willing to work together under the same flag. And they have that sense. I've been quite impressed with what's possible. And I wonder if you could address that from your own point of view, because it's so clear we do need a renewal of our leadership. We need new, fresh people coming in. How do we find them? How do we recruit them? How do we empower them to help change the direction of the country, Amy?
Well, I agree with you. And, I feel like, and this is why with the organization that I have, Honor Bound, I'm trying to inspire, women who have served the country, because I believe that we would come to these seats and have this background of, hey, right, I was elected as a Republican or a Democrat, but it's country first. It's country over party once you get into office. And I know that's hard to do in today's political environment, but as you just mentioned, it can be done. And I think that there are amazing members of Congress, for example, Abigail Spanberger, Mikey Sherrill, Alyssa Slotkin. These are folks who have proven that they can put this country above their political party, and we just need more of them. And so that's why it's so important to support candidates early and in primaries where they can succeed and then go on into the general election. And that's what Ry Barkott, I know, is doing as well.
Yeah. It would be wonderful if at some point there could be a gathering of people who are committed to things like this, who could share and also inspire each other and strengthen each other. Like Emily Cherniak has got a group called New Politics, and here in the Boston area, she's extremely well regarded. And has brought a lot of people into politics, not just for the House, but for state legislatures, for city councils. And it's women and men, but she puts a special emphasis on women as well.
Yeah, she's amazing. And one of the things that I do with Honor Bound is I've tried to connect candidates to New Politics, for example, because they run a training, sort of a course that really makes you take a look internally and figure out, is this something I want to do? And so, we're all kind of doing the same thing. We're just doing different pieces of it. Emily's piece is so important.
Yeah, Emily's list it's had an explosion in the number of women who've been applying.
We do, but yet we're still only 25% in
Yeah.
places like Congress. So it's not, we're not there yet. We need to keep working on it.
Definitely not there yet. Definitely not there yet. And I think that the evidence is increasingly, the evidence is increasingly piling up that women make at least as good leaders as men do. And in many areas of life, they, with empathy, for example, they're stronger than men, or they're better than men at it. Men have some features of leadership that are better than women's, but women really now, I think, are proving to people they're in it for the long haul, and they're in it to improve it.
Well, I think so too. And I just happen to believe, we probably wouldn't even be debating things like universal pre-K or paid family leave if we had more women on both sides of the aisle in office.
No, I'm waiting. A number of us are waiting to see what happens with this new bill that Congress is still looking at. The successor to the bill that was just passed on infrastructure. But there's money. I think there's going to be some money in this new bill for AmeriCorps and for national service. And that's something I think a lot of us would support. I will have to wait to see. We're not quite sure what's going to be in and what's going to be out of this package. But I know there are some people around the president who are very strongly for national service. Senator Coons, for example, of Delaware.
Yes, and he's been pushing this for a while, and it's needed. I also love that idea of national service, David, because it is bipartisan. There's a lot of people on both sides of the aisle that think this is a smart thing to do. General McChrystal has been pushing this for a while, and we need it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and I think there's some real opportunities now that are opening up. So what you're doing is vital. I mean, it would have been wonderful if you've been in the Senate. It'd been wonderful if you've been in the House, but you're doing the Lord's work with what you're doing.
Well, the goal was always to get better leaders into office, and I would have loved to have been one in office myself, but the goal is to get better leaders, and we can still do that. And so that's what I'm working on at the moment, because our country needs it. And a lot of the, folks there at Harvard, this is the new generation of leaders that we need. That they need to understand how important public service is, and that we value, and we got to have good leaders. We can't just cede this space.
When young women come in to see you, they've been out of school for a couple of years. They've graduated from college and they're thinking about what to do next. They're looking for your advice. What would you tell them about what they ought to be doing to become better leaders?
The thing that I learned the most, and you can kind of, I think, get this in the book, is that what I learned about leadership, I learned about by doing the hard things. Whatever it is that is a challenge out there for you personally, don't run away from it. Go after it. And once you have tackled that, even if it's a seemingly small challenge, that gives you a little bit more armor to go to the next one. And the best leaders are the ones that have confidence, that have vision, and that have character. And so that the character piece is something that you're always looking at, you're always trying to get better at. A lot of that has to do with, are you an honorable person? Do you follow through with the things that you say you're going to do? But a lot of it is just hard work, and getting that hard work and doing the things that you think you cannot do, like Eleanor Roosevelt said. Those are that's what shaped me. I look back on my career, whether it's flying an F-18 on the back of an aircraft carrier at night, or whether it's going through survival school, or whether it's going through, your sort of basic officer training at Quantico. Those were all hard things. And there were times when I didn't think I would get through certain obstacles, but you do it, and then you put it in your bag and you go to the next one. And by the time you're done, you're running for a major US Senate seat to try to change our country. And that's, whether you were successful or not, you just keep trying.
How do we settle what emerged during this last go round with the Congress and the president, with the growing movements within the party, within the Democratic Party? You had the progressives and you had the moderates, and they were at each other's throats before it was done. And we've been long decrying polarization, but it's been usually in the context of R's versus D's. This is actually, the left versus the right. within the Democratic Party. How do we get beyond that? How do we build on that so that parties themselves don't become polarized?
Yeah. Well, I think some of it is going to be natural, that you're going to have these sort of internal fights within the party. But at the end of the day, we are getting through that. We just passed a major infrastructure bill. They're probably going to pass another one. And, the election season, when it comes around, you're going to have these battles between, the far left and sort of the middle or the moderate. But my hope is that when we have these battles at the end, we come together and we say, hey, look, we agree on what the end state should be, but we just disagree on how to get there. And I have a really positive view of where the Democratic Party is, because I feel like we're a party that wants to govern. And I feel like we're a party that has solutions. And yes, there's some infighting about, how to get there. But at the end of the day, we're actually doing something. And if you look at the last 9 months, what President Biden has been able to do in the Democratic Congress, Senate, and House, it's incredible when you compare it to the previous 4 years.
Mm-hmm. Good. I want to make sure that people who are joining us by Zoom have a chance to ask us some questions. We got about a half an hour ahead of us. I'm going to be coming back probably with a few, but anybody there I haven't seen, Kevin, you've probably been keeping an eye on this. I see some people in the chat room. I'm not sure where else.
Yeah, so far just in the chat. I think we have a question from Jim Tull. Jim, if you wanna come on and ask your question out loud, that'd be great.
Thank you, and thank you for this event. Ms. McGrath, you mentioned the notion of patriotism and also public service. You also mentioned the events of January 6th and how they affected you. I think a lot of us are thinking deeply about the meaning of those two terms, and I wonder what your experience has been recently. Has the definition of either term or both changed for you?
It hasn't changed for me, and it's a great question. I think that my concern right now is that we have a lot of people who have sort of hijacked the word patriotism, and for all of the wrong reasons. And I'll give you an example. There was just a poll that came out that the Brookings Institution did, and 30% of Republicans were asked whether real patriots needed to resort to violence in this country. And 30% of them said they agree with that statement. And that's very disturbing for our democracy. Something like 70% of Republicans don't even believe that our current president is the legitimate president of the United States. And a lot of that has to do with the, what types of media organizations they're watching, the misinformation that has been floating around. And I'm very concerned about that. But for me, the definition of patriot right now is somebody who's standing up for truth, somebody who's standing up and not sitting back and just watching all of this happen in our country without trying to be a voice of reason, without trying to make a difference. And so, for me, that's what patriotism is right now. And sometimes that's really hard because you might have people who are your neighbors who, think that January 6th was a hoax, or you might have people in your family who believe that, Trump won the election and that it was stolen by President Biden. And, you're going to have to stand up and say, no, that's not true. And that's really hard. But to me, that's what patriotism is right now.
All right, we have Carly Zander up next.
Hi, thanks, ma'am, for joining. My name's Carly, and I graduated from USAFA in 2020. So this is my first assignment here, and I'll be heading to pilot training after this. I'm also in Professor Gergen's class, and we had Jill Lepore visit our class a few weeks ago, and she said women can't become what they can't see. But we repeatedly see people like yourself that are breaking these glass ceilings and are doing things that women haven't done in the past. And so I was wondering if you could just speak to that journey of being a woman doing something surrounded by men doing the same things, but like what challenges you had to face and overcome, and what advice you might have for people like myself that might be asked to do those same sort of challenges. Thanks.
That's great. And it's a fantastic question, and congratulations for your graduation there. You have a great career ahead of you. I think Jill Lepore is absolutely right. I was fortunate in my life because even though I didn't have, I couldn't see a whole lot of women being carrier pilots or fighter pilots in the Navy and Marine Corps, I did have an incredible role model in my mom, who went into a field dominated by men in the medical profession. She was one of the first women to graduate from the University of Kentucky Medical School in the 1960s. And so I had that in the back of my mind always, that I had somebody in my life who showed me that you could go into a field where there was nobody that looked like you and be successful. And so I was lucky. But I think Jill is absolutely right, and that it's so important for people to see folks who are like them succeed in a field and go into those fields. And so, for women out there like yourself, I would say, for your career in the Air Force, one, the sky's the limit. All of the jobs are open to you. You can do anything you want, which is incredible. And it wasn't the case when I was in your shoes 20 some years ago. But two, also recognize that you have been given a gift. You have been given a tremendous education at the United States Air Force Academy. And Uncle Sam expects a lot of you, especially as a woman. You're going to, just don't take that for granted. Go out there and serve your country, and you're going to do great things. And I think, that would be my advice to anyone coming out of the academies right now.
Great. We have another question here from Cappy Farrington.
Thank you so much for being here, Ms. McGrath. I'm a student at the Kennedy School, but I'm from Shelbyville, Kentucky originally, and I had the good fortune to work on and volunteer for both of your campaigns. So thank you so much. My question, I hope to go back to Kentucky after I graduate from the Kennedy School and want to work on democratic politics. What lessons are you taking away from your experience running campaigns there about Kentucky in particular, and advice you might have on those of us who want to follow in your footsteps?
That's a good question. I think Kentucky is a tough state right now for a Democrat, and it's unfortunate, but we just have to keep working hard. I always tell people when there were just tons of attack ads spent in my race against me, I always tell people I'm not going up against Mitch McConnell's $50 million of attack ads that he's putting on air this year. I'm going up against the last 20, 30 years of the constant branding that the Republicans have been able to do, unfortunately, in Kentucky. And so that's going to take some time to change. How do you change it? I think you change it by getting good, solid people who want to govern in office. And then you can look back and say, look, these are all the things that we did. We're serious about governing this country. We're serious about bipartisanship and getting things done. And that's the best way to change things, just sort of leadership by example. And so in Kentucky, I think there's a number of Democrats in office. Governor Beshear is a really good governor who has done a lot of stuff that needed to be done that frankly was politically difficult to do, but he's serious about governing. And I think that's just something that we got to continue, I guess, as Democrats to do, to be the party that is serious about taking care of people and taking care of our country. So I hope that answers your question.
All right, and let's see. There's one in the chat from Will Moynihan. I wonder if you'd like to go on the mic and ask your question, Will.
Sure, thanks. Hey, Amy, good to see you. I'm from Kentucky, Harvard grad, 99, also an F-18 pilot, as it turns out. But so my question really is about the rural divide that we saw in the recent Virginia governor's race, and how I think there's this perception, although I don't think it's reality, that the Democratic Party is, is focused more on the coast and not focused on, the states in the middle of the country, and that leads gives an easy chance for the Republicans to just run up the score there. And especially when you look at the Senate, where there's so many states that have rural populations that dominate, where we didn't used to lose. The Democratic majority leader in South Dakota was Tom Daschle, right? How do we go about trying to win back some of those voters?
It's really tough. And I think that, this is, of course, the question that everybody's asking. I think one of the things that people tend to forget who look at politics is that a lot of voters, don't vote on policies. They vote on emotions. They vote on, and this is where the Republicans have done such a good job of sort of creating culture wars because people feel like their values are being attacked. And at the end of the day, it's not about even, taxes or prescription drug prices. Sometimes it's just about those values. Those are like visceral values. And I think one of the things that Democrats can do is to make sure that we see that. Make sure that we have candidates that have served the country, who can go into these places and sort of counter some of these culture, in my opinion, and I know this is sort of a bipartisan talk we're having, but in my opinion, some of this stuff is generated in order to win elections by the Republicans and the media. And so I feel like if we can go out there and make sure that we're speaking to people in the rural areas, talking about our service to country, that we care about their livelihood, we care about our culture, we care about service, we are patriotic, those types of things. I think that's the best way to kind of counter it. Because I stand on, I'm not going to change the values of who I am, but to be able to go out there and talk about some of these things and why it matters, you can't do that you have to get out there, and you can't always do it in a 30-second commercial. So it's hard, but we were able to make a lot of those inroads, both in the congressional and the Senate race. We lost here in Kentucky. But in the congressional, we did 13 points better than the average Dem. And in the Senate race, we did 8 points better than Joe Biden did here. So we were able to get a lot of people that wouldn't normally vote for a Democrat. And I think that's because I went out there and I tried to talk about values as much as I could.
Do you think it was also because you were a veteran?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a lot hard. I mean, the typical Republican playbook is call them a communist, call them a socialist, and try to and do that. And it's a lot harder to paint me who served the country for 24 years as with those types of labels. So I think it absolutely had a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we have Dana Almond.
Hi, how are you, Amy?
Hey, good.
Good, awesome. It's a pleasure to be able to speak with you today. First, I just want to thank Abia Khan. I know her. I'm running as an independent out here in Arizona for state representative for Legislative District 11. So she was phenomenal for a couple of months that she was able to help me as a campaign manager.
Wonderful.
And one of my last assignments was at Fort Knox, Kentucky. So I'm an Army veteran.
Yeah.
And was responsible for the career progression and assignments for thousands of enlisted soldiers. So I'm a mother and I have 4 children and I have a set of triplets in there. And I've got my oldest daughter is a freshman at Ithaca College. And my triplets were born on 11/11/11. And I'm a West Point grad, 1994.
All right.
And I've got more than 23 years of active duty service. So I've been quite concerned for a number of years now, and I'm especially concerned about military academies and honor education. And I was already alarmed about it prior to January 6th, and I've expressed my discomfort publicly to the Academy, to West Point. And I've also put together a coalition of private citizens, veterans, and military academy graduates. And we actually met with staffers for Senators Duckworth, Tim King, Angus King, and Mark Kelly. And part of it is we'd really like, and I know there's some precedent here, that there can be an outside entity that can really look at character and leader development at the academies. And for me, my personal recommendation is right now, the West Point Cadet Honor Code, it's behind. It says a cadet will not lie, cheat, steal, or tolerate those who do. I believe there's a key word missing, and that's abuse. So it needs to say a cadet will not lie, cheat, steal, or abuse or tolerate those who do, because we know that the honor code, just like you and I know, that the honor code is sacrosanct. We learned that on the very first day at our academies. And I feel like, just looking at January 6th, we've lost that. But my questions are, one obviously has to do with the honor code education and your view on that. And the other one is campaigning. So while I've been campaigning, I've been trying to, when you retire, you leave the military, you're trying to translate military speak into speak into a language that people understand. So, I'm used to speaking military and worried about issues that affect military members, DODs, the civilians, but I was trying to figure out how do I translate into societal issues like voting rights, gun sense laws, and lowering prescription drug prices. I'd love your advice on that.
Yeah. Well, with regards to the honor code, I feel like the service academies have done a pretty good job of instilling this code. I mean, it's not perfect, and as you know, that sometimes it needs to be tweaked and looked at. But I feel like, in general, on balance, they do a pretty good job of this. I do believe that we need to make sure that we put people in positions. For example, I was pretty public about the board, the board of advisors, that we have people who have those values on some of these military academies and board of advisors, and not people who are clearly don't care about lying and that sort of thing. So I've been pretty public about that. I think that would send a message also to midshipmen and cadets. But with regards to running for office, I used my military service to talk about the values and why I believe in them. Let me give you an example. LGBTQ rights. I could go to the most conservative county in Kentucky, and if somebody asked me a question about this, gay marriage, for example, and I would just step back and say, what we cared about in the military? Can you shoot? Can you drive the tank? Can you drop the bomb? Not who you're married to. And are you a person of character? Are you somebody I can count on in combat? Because all that other stuff doesn't matter. I don't care. And just bring it home to why you care about those things. Voting rights. Don't you think everybody in America should be able to vote? I mean, this is what the greatest generation fought for. That's what that's what we wear the uniform to defend. And so, those are the types of things that I feel like this isn't for me, it wasn't a far left rallying cry. It was no, this is who we are as Americans. Right? And so that to me was how I was able to talk about some of these things on the campaign trail. Okay, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, I think we have another one here from Craig Foreman.
Yes, hi, Amy, Colonel McGrath. I've seen you and your husband speak articulately and give yourself, of yourselves, give time to causes like retire medical debt, the war within, and I've seen that with my own eyes. But I have found that we don't have much of a discussion of the role of a family unit in supporting these kinds of initiatives. We often get into a gender swim lane. And I know you've thought deeply about that as your husband. I wonder if you have some thoughts on what we can do from a policy point of view, or even from a public discussion point of view, to bring this issue of the family into the fore without it devolving into some partisan bickering of people's views of what family responsibilities are all about?
How do you bring the family into some of these discussions? You know, I tried to do it on the campaign trail by showing my family all the time. You know, I'd bring my, you know, when I ran in the congressional race, I would quite often bring my infant, and I would be giving campaign speeches with my little girl, you know, holding her. And some of it is just, you know, you bring that image of, you know, kids in the mix is important. When I talk about military, and how our military needs to adapt, I quite often talk about not only is it important for us to look at what China's doing in the South China Sea, but it's also important to keep quality people and keep people, not only women, because I get this question a lot, how do we keep women in the military, but keep men and women who are focused on their families too. You know, things like investing in daycare and that sort of thing are really important. So it is a little bit about policy. You know, we're all talking about universal pre-K right now and why that's so important. I think, you know, you're right. We do tend to sort of think of this thing as a women's issue maybe, but it's really a family issue. So I hope that answers your question. I don't have any lightning bolts from the sky on how to fix that.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. And then it looks like a full circle. Bia has her hand up here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kevin. Colonel McGrath, again, thank you so much for being here today. And it's been really great to hear you. Ma'am, I was wondering if I could ask you about your campaign, like your previous campaigns and runs for office. Now that a little bit of time has elapsed since, you know, those have taken place, I was wondering what reflections you had from, you know, life on the campaign trail, anything you would have changed. Obviously it worked out, you know, even if you're not in office, you're doing amazing work through Honor Bound. But, you know, just curious about what your thoughts were post all of that.
Yeah, well, no, that's a great question. You know, I don't have any regrets. I think when you run a campaign, especially one that is as high profile as the ones that we ran here, you know, you're going to make mistakes along the way. There's going to be times where you're like, wow, I wish I wouldn't have phrased it that way. You know, I mean, you're talking all the time. You get asked a ton of questions all the time. You're not maybe always prepared as you wish you could have been perfect on everything. You just can't. But you know what? You got to just let that stuff go and keep pressing forward. And that's what we did in our campaign. And I am so proud of everybody that worked on our campaign, all of the people that put in hours and hours to make phone calls, to knock on doors, the people that donated. And when you look back and you're like, wow, you know, well, she lost here in Kentucky. Well, you know what? The day after our race ended, we took our entire operation and rolled it over to this state called Georgia. And we did a lot of good work when they really needed resources down there, when a lot of people in very high ranking positions did not feel that those races could be won. And we didn't quit. And I'll tell you what, that made a difference. January 6th, for whatever happened in the afternoon, I woke up that morning and I was very thankful for all the work we did here in Kentucky, because we built a lot of momentum that we were able to shift over to a place that you know, really mattered at the end for our country. We made the Senate Majority Leader the Minority Leader, and I'll tell you what, I'm damn proud of that. So, you know, what's next? I'm working on trying to help our country and get good leaders elected. Spending a lot more time with my kids. Coach soccer, coach baseball a little bit, and we'll see what's next. But service is really important to me, and so, you know, that's protecting our country right now has been, first of all, it's been my life's work, protecting our country from sort of external threats, and still my life's work. We're protecting our country right now in our work. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Amy, this is David. Let me ask you maybe a near final question. The military academies are well regarded and I think properly regarded as the best training grounds we have for the younger generation. They've thought about it a long time. They've worked on it, different programs for a long time. There's nothing in the outside the military academies that does as good a job. What do you think we could be doing at places like the school or Woodrow Wilson School or Stanford? There are a variety of institutions now which are taking leadership more seriously, but I don't think any of us have the magic answer.
That's a great question. I think really trying to put a real value on service. In other words, there's things that you have to do at the academies that you may not want to do, but you just have to do them. And so those are some of the best learning ways you can learn. And some of these other institutions, how much do they value a student's giving back to the community? How much is that valued? How much is that pushed?
Yeah.
Is it pushed as much as sororities and fraternities? Is service pushed?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that I don't know because I didn't graduate from one of those colleges or institutions, but I feel like if that's something that can be done, that really helps with leaders. And the other thing is I learned so much. I was the girl from Kentucky who got stuck my freshman year with the girl from Queens, New York. And, we were roommates in the toughest environment of plebe summer, which is basically like boot camp. And all the stereotypes that she had about the girl from Kentucky, went out the door in the first, 5 minutes. And all the stereotypes that I had about the girl from New York City went out the door because we had to work together. And maybe that's another thing that some institutions can think about. How do we put students together who maybe wouldn't naturally come together? Because I think that's part of the problems that our country has right now is that we're so divided and we tend to grow up around certain types of people and never experience folks from other walks of life.
Yeah, good answer. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome.
So I think that's it for the questions in the chat, and I don't see any other hands.
Well, good. Amy, it's been a real pleasure. I'm sorry you weren't able to come here in person at this particular moment, but know that you have a rain check. We'd love to see you on campus one day. I think a lot of things you've been talking about with regard to leadership, to honor, how we can, how this younger generation in particular can take charge and lead us in a different direction. And we need all the voices we can find who are, people like you who are so respected. And you've served your country well, and you're continuing to do that, as every other speaker has said to here today. But mostly, thank you for your service. But thank you for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me and for what you do, and for everybody in Harvard to continue to do the hard things. Appreciate it.
Okay, you take good care.
All right, bye everyone.
Bye.